Hello Mackies, welcome back to my YouTube video. For today we're gonna do a book review, but before we get into that, I hope you kind of like keeping well and have someone to talk to. I know that we're kind of going through difficult times and people are just bombarded with emotions, bombarded with life's difficulties and all that extra stuff, and sometimes you feel that you really just can't get out of it, and this is something that we definitely will talk about. But if you need urgent help or just need to like vent it out urgently, I would suggest, if you're comfortable enough obviously and really have no one to talk to. I know I'd rather talk to a stranger than talk to someone I know, but over the past year I've actually like come to actually express my emotions and talk and fully express how I feel with the people around me, because also I have friends that I know that if I want to talk about a particular thingy, I'm going to talk to this friend about that. So sometimes having more than one friend is also very beneficial. But now I'm not saying like literally have 155 friends. And if you have 155 friends, that's still cool. That's chilled. They're your friends. It's your life. It's how you're choosing to navigate it. Anyway, if you really do want to talk, you can like send me a DM on @khosigadi_mac on Instagram, or you can just send me an email at monodialogueswithmackenzie@gmail.com, and we can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about and no one has to know. Or you can seek some free counseling and therapy. I'll leave helplines and stuff like that, because the suicide rate in this country is very high. The depression rate in this country is very high. It's literally skyrocketing. So if you really do want to talk and you feel that you have no one else to talk to, or you want to like just, I'll help in whatever way that I can. I might not be the best person, like I'm not qualified or whatever, but I feel that as humans we actually know how to listen. Just that these qualifications kind of make it easy, because there's procedures and steps that psychologists and therapists follow to like help. But if you're just able to listen, and sometimes also listening is a skill. Sometimes you maybe just need someone that will listen to you. Sometimes you just need someone that will talk you out of suicidal thoughts and other negative stuff. So yeah, man, let's not dwell too deep on that, because that's like a separate video. It's a different chat that we will have. But we're doing a book review on Racism After Apartheid by this guy whose name I cannot pronounce. Vishwas Satgar. I'm not sure. It's either Satgar or Satgar. If you know how to pronounce his name, let me know, because I cannot pronounce his name. But anyway, he basically edited the book. Don't know who the original author is, but we're gonna go with that. He is an associate and professor of relations, go Wits. And the book, the original price, okay, before we get on like prices, let me just give you a background review on this Satgar person. He's an associate professor at Wits, like I've already stated. He has books on Why Nations Fail, Leadership in the African Context, Destroying Democracy, COSATU in Crisis, Marxism, Political, and yeah, all that. So he like does a lot on, he speaks a lot on Marxism, speaks a lot on capitalism. Basically he's very socio-economic. Yeah, he's a lot into that economic stuff, so it definitely is a good read. This book, the original price on the internet, it says that it is 1,499 rand, so that's like basically 1.5. If you're an NSFA student, you'd know that that's literally your allowance for the whole month. So I don't think you want to be spending that much on a book. But I got this book for, let me tell you now, I got it for 380 rand at a secondhand store in Long Street. I think I got it around, I got this book 2 years ago, mid-year. And yeah, so that was grade 12. And I got it for 380. These are the details. I got it at store 199 in Long Street, Cape Town. And basically it's just a general second-hand bookstore, and they also have like other new books as well. They open on Mondays, basically. Ciao. Can you see that? It's like a book walker. Is it capturing? It is. Anyway, yeah. Mondays to Friday they open at 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. and on a Saturday like 9:30 to 1 p.m. or just by appointment really, which means they don't open on a Sunday as well. But it's always better to make an appointment. We know that, right? Like, we're grown. We know that already. Cool. Told y'all I got it for like 380. So like you can imagine how much money I saved. My maths is pretty off. But I'm thinking I spent like more than 1,000. I saved more than 1,000 rand on this book. 1,100 and something rand is what I saved. Had I, like, imagine I had gotten it for the original price and then only to find out that I can literally get it for 380 rand. And it was still in pretty good condition. Reason it's not in the best of condition, or rather in the same state as I got it, is because I used it, child. I used it. I read this book. I literally took it everywhere with me. If I was in a bus ride, I would go with it. If I was just like riding somewhere, going to a restaurant with my uncle or family or like something, I would literally have this book with me. If I was going for a doctor's appointment, in the waiting room, wherever, reception, literally everywhere, I would have this book with me because like it was a lot to read, honestly. My review on this book is that it was a lot to read, like it was taxing. And what I mean when I say it was taxing, it was just one of those hard books to read. It was a hard read. It was a challenging read. It was a difficult read, especially when you're familiar with the contents that it speaks about, but rather they go more in depth, and then you're like, oh snap. So like what I've been studying is just like basically on the surface, and like this is pretty deep. It's one of the longest reads of my life after this book by Stephen, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I still have not finished reading this book. It's just a lot, and that is probably because I am not at that point mentally where I need to read this book, perhaps. So I haven't really been as committed to this book as I have been to every other book that I've read. And I literally had to force myself through this book. It is a good read. Honestly, is a good read. It's just a lot. It's just a lot of reading material. It's just a lot of analysis. It's just a lot of critical thinking. And it's really coming in handy right now, especially now that I'm doing classical sociology. And we're currently speaking on Marxism as well, what it is and how Marxism and race just kind of like go hand in hand together, or like what the argument is or how it has influenced that. And also the part where we talk about Marxism and African liberation, why it is important to have Africans tell how how Marxism affects Africa, especially because you cannot have someone from the outside tell you about African struggles. It is rather better to have an African person tell you about African struggles because they also go through that. They experience it on a daily basis, right? So yeah, it definitely is coming in handy. I'm glad I purchased it, and I'm also glad that I actually forced myself to read. So I don't know if you have read, unfortunately I don't really have the book with me right now, Native Land, Salt Blakey. It's a book by Salt Blakey. It's called Native Land, I think. It's a lot similar to that. The only difference is Native Land specifically talks about South Africa and how the native people, specifically the Black people, dealt with racism, and how before these Europeans came, the Afrikaners, or rather dude, it's really weird, don't really know how to explain it, but they were basically like living in harmony until colonization took place, and then all that, but then it is specific to the Northern Cape and the Oranje Vrystaat, right? So this book is a lot similar to that, just that the only difference was that one was just specific to region, and this one focuses on global on the global world. The first part focuses a lot on the global world. The second part of this book, it's split in two parts. The second part of the book now talks about South Africa and how racism is still prevalent in South Africa and how we're still living in a white man's country, or rather the economy favors, or rather the economy is controlled by the white man and all that, and also that it's more a position of power. So if you're also a black person in a position of power, then you have better chances. So basically, money speaks better or gains you respect and worth or whatever. So yeah, man, I'm trying to keep this video short because the last book review I did was like 54 minutes. That was very long, and I know that sometimes it's kind of like difficult to like sit through all that, but I'm just going to read you guys a few comments from the people that actually contributed to this book and actually read the book and all that. So, right. Child, did I mention that it's a volume? It's a volume of many words. Anyway, Pindile Kunene. Okay, so the contributors to this book was Roxanne Dunbar Ozit, who is a historian and professor at California University. She authored and edited many books, including Roots of Resistance. I have not read that. A History of Land Tenure in New Mexico, and an Indigenous Peoples History in the United States. She is a veteran of anti-imperialist, colonist, and anti-capitalist movements. Over the past decade, she has participated in developing the International Indigenous Project and international human rights law. And then there's Sharon, who works at Lawyers for Human Rights, where she is head of refugee and migrant rights program, which is also something that they speak a lot about in this book, and also how South Africa and the rest of other countries in Africa are now. They also touch a lot on Afghanistan, but going back to how migration is now more like basically South Africans, or rather the South African government, is not necessarily being hospitable, or it's not necessarily being kind to refugees, to migrants, and all those people that are actually in need of help, right? And then there's Fabian Georgi, who is a political scientist working as a research associate at the University of Marburg in Germany. His doctoral thesis was a critical history of the International Organization of Migration. His research interests include critical theory, which is also, like, again, this book is very helpful. If you're really studying anthropology, I would also kind of like suggest this book. I don't do anthropology, but I do sociology. So definitely, if you're doing sociology, this is very helpful, especially now that you do critical thinking, or rather critical theory and classical sociology. Definitely advise that you get this book. If you're also doing inequality and stratification and all those things, I definitely suggest that you get yourself this book, Racism After Apartheid. Like I said, you can get it in Longstreet. I'm pretty sure, just search the net and you'll probably find it literally everywhere closest to you. And then there's Ran Greenstein, who is an associate professor of sociology at the University of Wits and works on issues of comparative history, conflict, race, and critical and political theory. Among his publications are genealogies of conflict, class, identity, and state in Palestine, or Israel and South Africa, comparative perspectives on South Africa, Zionism and its discontents, a century of radical dissent in Israel or Palestine. Most of his recent work is identity. Cool. And then there's Peter Hudson, who worked in the National Union of South African Student Wages Commission, the Industrial Aid Society, and the Metal and Allied Workers Union 1917. So I'm not like basically like reading a lot on their bio, and it also really isn't a lot, but I'm just like kind of like highlight a few points, because just so you know who the contributors are instead of just mentioning their names. And then there's Kwesi Mabaza, who is a researcher in political economy at the Mapungubwe Institute of Strategic Reflection. He is also an adjunct lecturer in political science at the University of Pretoria and a researcher associate. So you can already tell that you're talking people that have invested in this book or contributed to this book are actual South Africans, are actual people who are living in our current times and have studied the body of thought of Marxism, of capitalism, of imperialism, of all these school of thoughts, of this body of thought that we have, and we are currently all these sociological, socio-economic, politics, people that have actually studied these things and are actually of African descent and are in Africa. Cool. And then there's Feroz Manji, who is an activist and political intellectual from Kenya. He founded Mapambukuzwa News, Pambazuka Press, and Fahami Network for Social Justice, and is the publisher of the Raja Press in Montreal. Cool. There's Navita Menon, who is a professor of Jawaharlal University in Delhi and a feminist scholar and activist. Her latest book is Seeing Like a Feminist. Sounds interesting. Should probably get it. Adita Nidam, don't know, has been a leftist activist for 2 decades before returning to academia. He works at the Center of the Study of Developing Societies in Delhi. Also, while we are on this Delhi talk, in the book as well, they actually talk about how oppressive caste systems in India are, and how they're also a form of racism. So it's quite interesting. I don't know, man, if I should like go into this book like really deep, because like there's also a few things that I've highlighted, and it would just be a matter of me quoting and leaving there, and then it would just be for you to think, I'm probably going to do that. And then here's a proper description apart from the one that I gave about the person that edited the book, Satgar, I don't know. He is a democratic eco-sociologist and has been an activist for over 3 decades. He is an associate professor of international relations at the University of Wits, like I already mentioned, and he edits the Democratic Marxism series, for which he received the Distinguished Contribution Award from the World Association of Political Economy. He recently edited The Climate Crisis, South African and Global Democratic Eco-Socialist Alternatives. So like I said, there's actually a few things in this book that I like. You basically go through the book and you're constantly highlighting, because there's literally just so many points, like you're constantly highlighting and making notes. Like a lot is being said, and they also touch on the ANC in the second part of the book, and I just want to read something or highlight something that was said about the Freedom Charter. The initiative to formulate the Freedom Charter was not an initiative of the ANC exclusively, but of the Congress Alliance, made up of the ANC, the South African Indian Congress, and the South African Coloured People's Organization, and the South African Congress of Democrats. So basically, I know that right now, when people go out to vote, it's a matter of the ANC. Had it not been for the ANC, we would not have been here. But basically, it's a collective effort of all the political parties that already did exist during those times, and that is also something that I'm also trying to navigate with the political parties that we have right now, especially when we're going out to vote next year. Yeah, it is next year. No, 2022. Whenever our next elections are, 2024, is it? Yeah, but whenever our next elections are, who are we going to vote for, when there are so many parties and it seems like they're fighting against each other, but then at the same time they're we just want a better South Africa, but they're not necessarily coming together in a form of coalition and just forming one party and really trying to represent our people instead of just like constantly pitting against each other. And also you get your main party, which is the ANC, but then there's so much division within the ANC itself, and you're like, is my vote even worth it? Like, what are these people actually fighting for? Like, it just becomes really blurry, and like it's a lot. It really just is a lot. And then right now I'm just trying to find something else. Dude, like I said, I'm just like gonna read like a few things that I've highlighted, and then that's just for you to go think about. So it's not necessarily gonna make a lot of sense because I'm not reading everything in context. But anyway, all the data on socio-economic equality clearly points out that African females are the most marginalized social groups in post-apartheid South Africa. Post-apartheid, after Africa, pre-apartheid, before apartheid, apartheid. For example, the experience of food insecurity among African women residing in rural and informal urban areas is higher than among their male counterparts. Like, already that just allows room for thought. Like, yeah, if you want to think about it, you can think about it, because that's really obvious. But then, yeah, we can still have a conversation about it. But do we have a conversation about, I don't know, man. I don't know. But it's just a lot. So from this book, I found another thing I actually want us to like have probably a podcast or still like a dialogue actually about, from what I read, is that the sexual division of labor has serious implications for women's roles as citizens, because every woman's horizons are limited by this supposedly primary responsibility, whether in their choice of career or their ability to participate in politics, trade unions, elections, etc. Women learn when very young to limit their ambitions. This self-limitation is what produces the so-called glass ceiling, the level above which professional women rarely rise, or the mummy track, the slower track upwards where women put aside some of the most productive years of their lives in order to look after children. The assumption that women's primary profession is motherhood drives state policy, as well as the governments of France, Germany, and Hungary give women 3 years of maternity leave in the hope of boosting their birth rate. In 2008, the Indian government increased maternity leave for its employees to 6 months, as well as instituting paid leave to its female employees for a further 2 years to take care of minor children. This essentially means that only women will have to take the difficult decision of putting their careers on the back burner to bring up children, while younger men race ahead of them because their child care responsibilities are fully borne by their wives. There's a lot of content in this book. This book is power. It was a long read. Like, I really, like, there were times when I was like, child, like, I can't believe I'm reading this. Like, this is giving me a headache, and I'm just trying to read and escape from like schoolwork, because like that's also a lot. And like right now I feel like I'm studying again. It was just really a lot, but in the end it's coming in handy right now. Again, like I'm saying, it's coming in handy. So if you're doing sociology, if you're doing politics, political science, if you're doing philosophy, if you're doing ethics, if you're doing, I would even say if you're doing theology, so if you're doing like anything that requires critical thinking, that requires, even if you're doing humanities, dog, like you literally, like this book is literally for everyone. And it just, also if you're Pan-African and if you're just like looking to get a deeper understanding of history and how far we have come as civilization, how far we've become as people, and also as an African, and how these social issues affect us on a more intimate level, I would definitely suggest that you get this book. It really was a good read. I'm not gonna go more into it. I feel like I kind of like did you justice, but of course, if you want me to like go deeper into the book, the contents of the book, I can definitely do that. It would have to be a separate video because I do not want to overwhelm you with information the same way I was like overwhelmed with information in this book. Like, I was so overwhelmed. Anyway, that is all from me, Mackies. And before I leave, if you're wondering where I got my durag, follow Mackenzie Hive, Mackenzie_Hive on Instagram. That is my story, and I packed myself, and like right now I'm looking like skir like a yo-yo type of person, you know. That is all. I'm sending you all much love and light. Come on. Yo, you'll remember the song. Oh mama do hira fira ma. A bokkie va de Maybelline. Se kan male, maar ze is zo loslappie. Oh mama do hira.